Welcome to All at Once, a podcast dedicated to raising multiples because life with multiples deserves its own space.
Whether you're expecting twins, already deep in the chaos, or simply curious about life with multiples, you're in the right place.
We're Sinead and Gabby, two mums with 5 kids between us, including 2 sets of twins.
Sharing honest, unfiltered stories about the highs, the lows, and everything in between.
This is a safe space to laugh, cry, and feel understood, all at once.
Let's jump in! Starting solids can feel exciting, overwhelming, and honestly a little terrifying, especially when you're doing it with twins or multiples. So today, we're joined by Paediatric Dietitian and Nutritionist Olivia Bates from Nourishing Bubs to answer all the questions we had starting our own solids journey. From readiness signs and allergens to picky eating, milk feeds, and making the whole process feel less overwhelming. This episode is packed with practical advice and so much reassurance for parents navigating this stage. Here's our conversation. Hi, Olivia. Thank you so much for joining us on All at Once. Welcome. Before we jump in, for those who don't know you, can you tell us a little bit about you and what you do?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, guys. I'm Liv. I'm a pediatric dietitian and nutritionist and the founder of Nourishing Bubs, which I founded back in 2017, I think it was. We do a range of frozen baby food products, finger foods for slightly older toddlers, and a allergen introduction range designed to make it easy to introduce allergens to babies.
Amazing. Can't wait to get into all of that. How did you end up finding Nourishing Bubs?
So I was a dietitian. I'd come out of uni and I had worked for an almond milk company straight out of uni. And I really developed an interest in developing food products. I had previously always wanted to be a pediatrician, so definitely had that, interest in babies and wanted to always do something in that space. And then I think I, just from like my time working in hospital during uni, I think I realized that you're a little bit limited with what you can do as a dietitian in hospital. A lot of what I was doing was dealing with malnourished patients. So it was like handing them an extras list. And I was like, I feel like I didn't go to uni for that long just to hand someone this like extras menu and give them bacon at every meal. So I was like, oh, this is just not for me. And then I'd also done some time at Arnott's actually. And I realized, if you work in food industry, you have the ability to basically evolve the food supply. And I know that sounds really big picture, but what they were working on at that time was, for example, over multiple years, they were trying to reduce the sugar level in tiny teddies, for example. But obviously with the food supply, you can't just pull half the sugar out straight away. It has to be like tiny amounts over multiple years so that the consumer doesn't realize that there's a change in the recipe. So I think I realized, just being able to influence the food supplier could potentially, impact more people. And at that time, it was very much, all those shelf-stable squeezy packs and jars of baby food. And I think I was just kind of grossed out by the concept of food that sits on the shelf that contains beef and stuff. I was, oh my God, I would never eat that. Why? How could we feed that to our babies? So, I really wanted to almost take it back to basics when it came to baby food. So that's sort of, where it came from.
Amazing. I would have never thought of tiny teddies. It's
I know, it's actually so interesting. I mean, and shape, shapes. They're trying to reduce the salt level over multiple years. It's really interesting, obviously, with big food companies like that, it's a lot of time and it's a well-established brand. So it really has to be such a gradual reduction. But it's interesting.
There's so much information online. And I think parents of twins or multiples, it can feel even more overwhelming because you're navigating all of it with more than one baby, often with different personalities, preferences, and developmental timelines. What are the actual signs a baby is ready for solids?
Yeah, I actually always say to people, I do a lot of intro to solids education. When you're in your mother's group, for example, try not to compare to another baby, in the group because it can be really off-putting. So I can't even imagine for parents of multiples, when you've literally got 2 babies straight there and they might not develop at exactly the same rate. So I guess the key thing that we are thinking about in terms of those signs of readiness is going to be good head and neck control. So that's always our number one sign. I don't necessarily, for example, expect you to put bub in the middle of the floor with no support whatsoever and expect them to be able to hold themselves upright. But if you were to put them in the high chair, for example, where there is a little bit of support, they should be able to hold themselves upright. If they've still got a bit of a floppy neck or they're falling falling, not that you guys necessarily be seeing this, but like their head's falling forward, that would be a just suggest that they're not quite ready yet. Things like tummy time can really help strengthen those muscles just to help them keep that head upright. And the reason that that's so important is that obviously we don't want them to choke. And if their head is still falling a bit, it is a choking hazard. I guess more secondary to that would be things like showing an interest in food. So, for example, while you're eating, they're starting to become really interested in it, where previously they weren't so interested or just unfazed by it. They might be reaching out for your food when you're eating it, or if you were to bring a spoon near their mouth, they would like open it as if to take it in. So definitely an eagerness, whereas previously that wouldn't have existed. Another thing that we start to notice is that the push extrusion reflex, so where they're constantly pushing their tongue out, that's going to start to slow, but don't be alarmed like if it's still there, when you want to get started, because that's something that can take sort of even up until 8 months to fully disappear. But
Right,
yeah, head
okay.
and neck control will be our number one sign to look for.
And would you say there's an ideal age, or does it more so come down to developmental readiness?
Yeah, look, in Australia, we like to use the Australian Society of Clinical Immunology and Allergy guidelines, and they recommend introducing around 6 months, not before 4 months, when baby is showing
Okay.
signs of readiness. So usually we will, see those signs of readiness start to appear anytime from 4 months to 6 months. So it sort of is this window, I guess, really highlighting the fact that, yeah, every baby will develop at a slightly different age. I guess particularly with multiples, we'll often see that might be born a bit premature. So with premature babies, we usually say 5 to 7 months chronological age, so not that corrected age, which can be as early as 3 months corrected. In saying that, if your baby was born premature, it's definitely something to discuss with your GP or pediatrician. They will, ultimately tell you when it's time to start. But yeah, usually between 5 to 7 months actual age for those preemie babies.
That's so interesting because, like, Gabby and I both didn't have preemie twins, so it's not something we had to think about previously, but there would be so many parents of twins navigating their solids journey, maybe not even, like, having that light bulb moment to take that into
Yeah.
consideration.
What about if you have one twin that is showing all the signs that they're ready and another twin that isn't? Do you then just wait for the twin that isn't showing the readiness signs and approach it that way?
Yeah, so you just have to approach them, like one
Uh,
would start and one might start a little bit later because they can be different just because they were, born at the same time. You need to be guided by them individually. Obviously the age comes into play, but it really is more about those developmental signs. In saying that, if your baby was approaching 7 months and hadn't shown any signs of readiness, I would definitely just be checking in with the pediatrician to make sure that there's nothing else going on, like something like an undiagnosed tongue tie could interfere with their ability to actually, be able to progress onto solids, because it can interfere with their ability to handle more than just like liquid food, for example.
Yeah,
Gosh,
sure.
yeah.
Gosh, this takes me back. I was going to say, obviously, when you're starting out your solids journey, there's a big debate around, baby-led weaning or purees. Is there a right way to start, or is it sort of more dependent on your family and the babies?
Yeah, such a good question. Definitely there's been a big rise, I guess, in the popularity of baby-led weaning in recent years. Baby-led weaning, for those that aren't aware, is, where you skip the puree stage altogether and you move straight to finger foods. And it is really, as the name says, led by the baby. You would put the food on their little high table situation and let them pick it up and bring it to their mouth. And the reason that it is popular is it leans into their ability to monitor their own appetite. So we know, for example, that babies innately have really good appetite cues. For example, if you're breastfeeding, you would know bubble cry if they're hungry, and if you're putting them on the breast and then they stop feeding when they've had enough, you don't actually know how much they've taken in, and that's because they're able to monitor their own appetite cue. Similarly, we're saying with the solids, we want to lean into that and let them eat when they're hungry and then stop feeding when they've had enough. If we do purees, we do have a habit, especially if we've like slaved all day to make this beautiful meal, to go, come on, one more mouthful, come on, and what they're saying is
Yeah.
you can almost push past their natural appetite cues. So that's, I guess, why it's really gained popularity. I would say more than anything, it comes down to family preferences, what you're comfortable with. For those people that do want to do baby-led weaning, I wouldn't recommend starting it before bub was 6 months of age, just because the likelihood is that they won't have that hand-eye coordination that's required to actually bring the food to their mouth. So if your bub is showing the signs of readiness before 6 months and you do decide to start before then, I would just start with some purees, and then you can start to incorporate some of the baby-led weaning finger foods from 6 months of age. I'm personally a really big advocate of a combination approach if that's something that you're willing to do. I know a lot of feeding specialists are. That's where, you either do one meal where you are offering a combination of the two. So you might, for example, offer the floret of broccoli and broccoli puree, or you could do one meal's more puree focused, one meal's a bit more finger food focused. It really is what works for you. But for some people, and I think particularly first-time parents, understandably, that fear of choking is very real. So it's not as popular with first-time parents as it is with second and third time. And the reason that it gains so much popularity then is, one, they've been through it before, and two, the younger one often wants to copy what the older siblings are doing. And then it's, do I actually want to do purees as well? It's easier just to do a varied version of what they're having. I guess obviously just remembering with baby-led weaning, many babies won't have teeth when they start solids. So it's, making sure the food is appropriate, making sure it can be squished between your forefinger and thumb so that they can squash it between the palate and tongue of their mouth. So it's really soft foods, or foods that are really easy for them to pick up. Like the lamb chop is probably the cliche image of baby-led weaning. Obviously they can't bite that, but they'll suck on it and gnaw on that. So things that are easy for them to grab are important.
Gabby, I'm interested because Gabby has an older daughter and then twins. What approach did you take?
This is so bad, I don't even remember with the twins. But I do remember with my first, I was so excited by the whole starting the solids journey. I didn't feel nervous or anything. I was just, because I love cooking. And so I was I think I did both, but then I would make all this stuff that she wouldn't eat. So it was like you were saying, you slaved away all day and you're forcing them to eat this food that they don't want to eat. But then when it came to the twins, I think I started with purees because I remember doing a lot of purees, but then I actually don't remember. I probably did. This is so bad. I was actually blocked it out.
We were discussing off mic how we just both cannot remember the first year. We just.
But I feel like maybe that's a second baby thing anyway. You're just kind of
It's a blur.
That's why I asked, because I thought you'd be I know for me, my twins my first, so I was quite nervous. So I started with purees and then I ended up doing the mixed feed, a bit of both, right? I don't know. I just kind of did what I felt worked kind of thing. But I thought maybe, Gabby, with the twins, you would have been a lot more confident that time around and just.
I think I was definitely more confident, but I also cared less about the journey, as bad as that sounds.
Yeah, no,
because it was my second time. The first time it was a nostalgic, and then I probably went in knowing that they're not going to eat any of this food that I'm making, so I'm not going to bother.
There's that too. I think the first time is it needs to be perfection. Everything is perfection. And often it'll be people that are I'm going to make everything and it's all going to be organic and bone broth and soaked and all of that. You did all of that. You're
I had intention, but then I had twins. So that was out the window straight away. But I had that vision for myself. And I think for the first few weeks I was going to be that person, but it did not.
Yes. Yeah. I feel I always hear this, or you hear this and then it's and then their dad gave them a McDonald's chip. And then and I'm why did I bother?
Yeah.
I love it.
For parents of twins or multiples who are already stretched for time, what are some realistic and practical ways to approach solids without them feeling overwhelmed?
Well, obviously, aside from getting my product.
Yeah.
No, I think I definitely would always say take it a day at a time. It really is especially at the beginning. And I don't know if you guys remember this, but it's slow. It's not, I think people go into it being yes, we're starting solids and it's going to be this big thing. They might only take half a teaspoon. It can be such an anticlimax. oh, is that it? Oh, I was like really excited about this. Like when you first start, you're only offering food. You should only offer food once per day. So, we're
Wow.
we're always starting with a breastfeed or a formula feed first, and then waiting
Yeah.
half an hour, and then offering a solid feed. And it's one solid feed per day, and that's for a month. So like it's slow. Like don't go and get yourself too worked up. Like don't go and do a big batch cook, because someone was saying to me yesterday, they're like, I prepped all of this like pumpkin, and then the baby hated pumpkin, and I've got a freezer full of pumpkin, and now like, what do I
This is
do?
taking me back
But that,
so
that is
much.
that is so true because Liv, I used your product and it was what I first fed them, and it was so helpful having that because I had no idea where to start, and I could try all the different flavors and different types of vegetables and whatnot, and it wasn't like it's just that ice cube size, and if
Yeah,
it does go to waste, you don't like I
you
didn't
don't feel
slave
as
away all
bad.
day, and it kind of gave me the understanding of what the twins might like and what I
Like
could focus on
exactly.
going forward. But yeah, that you remind me, I'm trying to remember my journey, and I remember, I think I started 1 week doing, only giving them food for breakfast, and then like the second week or
Yeah.
third week started introducing a bit of lunch. And is
It's
that how you're
slow.
meant to?
That's correct. Like it's
Yeah,
slow. Like we just want to offer it once, because it should be basically they're starting at a point where at 4 to 6 months they've been having only breast milk or formula. And the goal is to by 12 months they're getting most, if not all of their energy and nutrients from solid food. But that's still a 6 month period to like build up to that. It is so gradual, and if you start a little bit earlier, often it's slower, whereas like a 6 month old baby, for example, might dive in a little bit more, but like we're
right.
not talking half a cup of food, we're talking max a tablespoon. So like it can take 6 weeks to get to half a cup. So like it is slow. I'd be starting for the first 2 to 4 weeks, I'd just be doing one new food a day. It doesn't need to be that doesn't need to necessarily be only one food, but for example, day one you might do zucchini. Day two, you might do zucchini with pumpkin, because then pumpkin would be your new food. Day three, you could do pumpkin and cauliflower, because then cauliflower would be your new food. If you want to, though, and some people literally just do day one zucchini, day two pumpkin, day three cauliflower. Like you can also do it that way, but it's slow, it's gradual. It's not, oh, yep, we're going straight into bolognese. Like, and you don't want to do that as well, because you also, remember that their guts are really immature. So they've only had breast milk or formula. So we've got to gradually introduce these new tastes, these new textures, these new things, which are obviously also going to impact how their guts got to get used to that as well. So we're not going to go for, really complex flavors. Like it's a slow burn at the beginning. So I always say, like, just take one day at a time. I think when you think about everything that needs to be done at the beginning, all these allergens need to be introduced, all these foods need to be introduced. Ideally, I want to get 100 foods before one, and I don't want them to choke, and like all of that, you can be really overwhelmed. But then if you take a step back and go, actually, it's just like one day at a time, and we're having half a teaspoon. Oh, actually, this is a slow burn. Like it's gradual. Also, with the allergens, I would say my number one tip is like, just aim for one a week, and it makes it much less overwhelming. There's 18 to introduce when you take into account all the 9 tree nuts, for example. But there are 26 weeks between 6 months and 12 months. So, if you aim for one per week, that gives you some weeks off for holidays, if they're sick, etc. And it makes it much less overwhelming. But if you're like, oh my God, I've got to introduce 18, like it can seem like a lot.
I wish I had known all of this, because now I'm reflecting. I remember I was like the one that I went to the library with Billy and I got all the cookbooks and I cooked all these
No wonder
different.
you were disappointed.
Yeah. So no wonder the twins had a different journey. But like you touched on the different foods, is there any foods that you should start with?
Look, there's no real like hard and fast. I mean, people always ask me, they're like, what about rice cereal? I feel like that's one that sort of comes up, and I still hear of like no offense to the old school like GPs, but like they're the ones still going, you should start with rice cereal. Like to be honest, that's something that's been around for many years, just because it was introduced during the Depression as a
It's like our parents' generation.
yeah, literally. I was like, we were all brought up on like Farrex. Like they're like,
Yeah.
yeah, I started you on that. So basically it was because during the Depression, people couldn't afford to buy like red meat and the foods that naturally contain iron. So what they did is they fortified rice generally considered a non-allergenic food, and they added iron and all like other nutrients to it, and it was an easy way to make sure that babies were getting enough iron. We know that from 6 months to 12 months, their iron requirements jump up quite substantially, so it is a really important nutrient. However, we're lucky that times are slightly better now, and hopefully people can afford afford to be buying meat and other foods that contain iron. So therefore, like, I guess I always say to people, it also comes down to what your priorities are. Like, for some people, they want to know, what, I want to give it and just go like that meal, know that meal, like at least once per day, they're having this iron rich meal, and I can like tick that off and feel good about that. For some people, they're a bit more like, I'd prefer to give something less processed. I'd prefer to give them whole foods. Like, I guess one of the issues and criticisms of the iron that's in that is that it's, because it's fortified, it's just not as well absorbed. Like, it's not as well absorbed as having, say, for example, like beef, where the iron in beef is what we call heme iron. So animal sources are better absorbed. So if you would prefer a more whole food approach, you can definitely by all means skip the rice cereal. If you want to just like, you want an easy like tick box, for you it might be an easy way, or at least on some days, just to offer it. Like, I think people need to be reminded, like people have different priorities, and I think that people shouldn't be made feel bad if they want to do that. Would I do it? I probably personally wouldn't do it, but that's just, that's not a priority for me, because I'm a cook and I like, I can offer whole foods, but it's definitely not the devil. So there's no real hard and fast in terms of like what, your first food should be. I'm definitely a big advocate of a vegetable forward approach. We know that babies innately have a preference for sweet food, and then obviously they have breast milk or formula, which is obviously naturally very sweet. So if you then go on to sweet fruits, for example, it can be that then quite hard to be like, you've had mango and banana, and then it's like, here's broccoli. Like, it's a little bit underwhelming. Like, I know what I'd choose. But like, only 6% of Australian children are meeting their recommended veggie intake. So like, we really need to, lay those foundations. That window between 0 and 2 is just such a crucial window in terms of laying those food foundations. And even though the likelihood is between 18 months and, 3, they'll probably reject everything, they will come back round if you've laid those foundations. In the UK, they actually include, start with your leafy greens, etc., to get the, more bitter vegetables in sooner. So I do encourage you to get as many veggies in as you can first. That's also why like we have that veggie pack. So I'm like, even if you could do that and then start to incorporate meats with that, and then start to add the fruits, as you probably know, just with food guidelines anyway, we should be aiming for 5 serves of veg per day and 2 serves of fruit. So veg should be more dominant than fruit, but I'm sure you'll notice with your kids that it's much easier you could get them to eat 5 serves of fruit, and if it was inverse, it would be
Absolutely.
much better. So I think just trying to encourage a love for vegetables early on will definitely help you. And then just making sure that from 6 months, we're starting to include those iron-rich foods.
I remember doing purees with like veggies and fruit, like is like to give it that sweetness. And I found my daughter liked that more. Is that still good?
I mean, I wouldn't.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not trying to look, it's the reason that I'm not a big fan of that is it just like they get a false sense of water. Like the likelihood is it will be better tolerated. And I know so many people do it. And that's why, for example, those pouches are so popular. But if you turn over a savory pouch, you'll notice that often it's like 50, 60, 70% fruit. And it's like, oh, like my baby loves these pouches. And then you go to offer like a chicken casserole or something, and they're like, they hate it because it doesn't have that fruit that they used to. I think we need to teach children to understand savory as savory, especially fruits like, apple and pear, which, naturally quite high in fructose, like they really do sweeten foods up. And so children are just not learning like savory is savory. What does a bitter food taste like? It's very hard if they're used to these all sweet purees to then be like, here, have a piece of broccoli. Like, it is quite disappointing.
So that's where it all went wrong for me, and that's why she doesn't eat.
Yeah. I mean,
love when you have epiphany moments on this show, Gabby.
Yeah, look,
it all makes sense.
I try to encourage. I always try to encourage, if you can, to like offer the fruit separate.
Okay.
It makes sense when you lay it out like that.
Yeah.
If you go for number 4. If we switch lanes, I also think allergies are probably one of the biggest sources of anxiety for parents starting their solids journey. You did touch on this already a little bit, but how should parents introduce allergens safely?
Yeah,
'Cause I know this was the part I was so nervous about.
so understandable. I think aside from choking, allergens are like definitely the biggest source of fear. So this is something where we've seen big changes in the recommendations over the years, which is why there can be a little bit of confusion as well. So prior to 2016, they actually used to say, don't introduce the allergens until a child is 1. If they're high risk, so a high risk child would be a child where 2 parents had allergies, they'd be like, don't introduce them till 2 years. And what happened was we just saw such a rapid spike in allergies that Australia is now the allergy capital of the world, which is not.
Oh, you're
Yeah, it's
kidding.
so bad, so bad. But that's why
Oh,
they are doing a lot of research into it. So the recommendations now are to make sure that you get all of the food allergens in by the time that they're 12 months of age. But just as important as doing like an initial introduction is making sure that you maintain it in their diet. And they now say to do that, like offer
mm,
them at least once per week. So in terms of the initial introduction should be done ideally over like a 3-day period. I usually find it easier just to do 3 consecutive days. As I mentioned before, I think aiming for 1 per week makes it seem a little bit more achievable. You could do it if you wanted to speed it up. Some people are like, oh, we're going away, so I want to get a few in, so you could do like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday eggs, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, something else. Like you can do it that way. But in terms of like the 3 trials, we start with a very small amount. So ideally a quarter of a teaspoon. So we'd get a quarter of a teaspoon of the allergen and mix it into a previously tolerated puree. So for example, say we're doing egg. Now with egg, there's also been updates in the recommendations. So they want you to boil an egg for 10 minutes. So the thing with egg is depending on how long it is cooked for impacts how allergenic it is. So some kids might be, for example, able to tolerate an egg that's baked in muffin, but couldn't handle, for example, a softly scrambled egg because it's been cooked for less
that's so
time. The
interesting.
longer the cooking, the less allergenic it becomes. So egg is one of the most common allergies. So with the egg, they want you to hard boil it for 10 minutes, allow it to cool, then get the yolk and the white, mash it all together, and then get a quarter of a teaspoon of that and mix it into a previously tolerated puree. Now, provided that there's no reaction, we'd increase it to half a teaspoon. Then provided that there's no reaction again, we'd increase it to 1 teaspoon. Now, usually we say after those 3 trials that we can then go, okay, baby's not allergic. And then we would move to that maintenance where we offer it ideally a minimum of once per week, and just build up obviously the amount that you are offering to them. A couple of things I guess would be make sure that you always introduce allergens in particular, but I would say all new foods in the first half of the day with time before their next nap. We know an allergic reaction will take place 5 minutes to 2 hours after the food is eaten. So we want to just, make sure they're going to be awake for that period. Also, obviously, we don't want to do it at the end of the day, peak hour. We want to make sure that, it's as easy as possible to get to the doctor or hospital if there was a reaction, God forbid. Making sure that you're only introducing 1 allergen at a time so it's easy to identify what the cause of that is. And then ideally, if you can make sure there's another adult at home, I would say this is particularly important
Yeah.
for twins as well. Making sure there's another adult at home, because if a reaction does occur, you want someone to be able to be on the phone to emergency, someone to drive, whatever you need to do to manage the situation, because it is scary. And ideally do it in the comfort of your own home with your family. Like Christmas Day, for example, is not the day to decide we're going to offer prawns today. And I feel like this probably does happen as well.
Some of these foods you just don't they're not on your shopping
Yeah.
list unless set out for
Yeah,
it
so I
kind of
think
thing.
also I guess that also is another point, is just to ideally introduce them in the order of frequency in which you eat them in your house. They have updated the guidelines to
Interesting,
say get
okay.
eggs and peanuts in first, but after that, do it in order of frequency. So I would assume, unless you live in a really bougie household, like you're probably not having prawns every week. So that's probably your last one. It's just because obviously, as I've said, that maintenance is just as important as that initial introduction. So we want to make sure that, it can be easy to keep that up as well. like sooner. And I guess also in terms of just like what you're looking for in a reaction. So we do talk about a mild reaction versus a severe reaction. So mild tends to be more like breaking out in hives or a rash, but it's important that they've actually also updated the guidelines to say if they just came out with a contact rash, so something where like it's probably just around their mouth where it's come into contact with the food, that's not necessarily an allergic reaction, and to offer the food again if that's all they came out with, because that might just literally be a contact rash. But it's more like hives, like over the trunk of their body, etc. But often no other significant changes in baby's well-being. They'll probably seem unfazed by it, but you'll notice that the hives are there. Whereas a severe reaction, you're going to know about it. There's no doubt about a severe reaction. It often involves two systems. So it might, for example, involve the skin and then the respiratory system. So they might have difficulty breathing, changes in their cry, significant changes in their well-being, profuse vomiting, swelling of the tongue, swelling of the face. And obviously in those situations, we want to be calling 000 and getting to medical service as quickly as possible, where they'll administer adrenaline. With the more mild reactions, sometimes you can just take a photo of them. Obviously, stop feeding the food immediately, take a photo of them. You can administer an antihistamine, and provided it's otherwise fine, you can watch them and make sure it just, the symptoms come down. Obviously, if you're in any doubt or you're anxious about it, do go straight to the doctor or call 000 and they can talk you through it.
Yeah, that was obviously I think every parent's biggest fear. But yeah, like you touched on, I never introduced any of the allergens without my husband, Andy, being home because I was so paranoid. This is all coming back to me now, but I actually had some girlfriends, and I feel like this might be a little bit over the top, but I guess better to be safe than sorry. But they would literally get camping chairs and like sit outside of the hospital.
That is common. Look, the doctors try to discourage it, but I know a lot of people say this. Like, I think if at the end of the day, if it relieves your anxiety, you should do that. If you were living far away from a hospital, I probably would do something like that. The only thing that is not recommended, and they taught us this at uni, I've not actually ever heard of anyone actually doing it, but it would be like getting your mother's group and sitting opposite the hospital and being like, today we're all going to have peanut butter sandwiches. So apparently they were called nut parties. I feel like I need to do a bit more research into this. But the issue with it obviously is imagine one child has a reaction and then suddenly they're panicking. Then all the mums are going to be panicking. Then all the and then it's this hysteria, not to mention the mass influx into the emergency department. So that is not encouraged. Just don't do that.
If your child has had a mild reaction, would you continue to offer the allergen, or what would you do in that case?
So if you had hives, as opposed to a contact rash, you wouldn't proceed to the second exposure. If you had hives, you would go, okay, we're stopping. You'd either go to the doctor straight after that, or you would have taken photos and you wouldn't offer that food again until you've gone and discussed it with your GP, show them the photos, and they might discuss whether you do a challenge, because yes, the possibility is that, a mild reaction can then evolve to a more severe reaction. So they would likely want to then refer you on to an allergist to go and do further testing. The likelihood is that they would still get you to proceed with the other allergens, but just hold on that one until they have gone and had it properly diagnosed, because then what they can go and do is do some skin prick testing, do more accurate diagnosis of the allergy, and then they would develop an action plan, whether or not that involves a challenge down the track, which often it will. They will often wait a period of time and then try and reintroduce it. So yeah, often a mild reaction can evolve to being a more severe reaction, which is also why we do the smaller amounts. So it's obviously to mitigate the risk of a severe reaction occurring first up. Often the reaction won't occur on the first exposure. It will happen on the second exposure, which is because the first exposure can be what they call a sensitization. So it's the skin sort of getting used to it, but it's perceived it as a threat. And so the second exposure is when you'll see the reaction. This is why it's also really important if your baby has any broken skin, for example, we don't want any food to accidentally enter the body through the skin rather than through the oral route. So if your baby, for example, had eczema, we would ideally want to get the eczema under control before we started introducing the allergens, because if it enters the body through the skin, it can actually trigger an allergic reaction occurring. It's also the reason why you need to just be careful of any creams that you're putting on their skin, any baby body washes, anything you're washing with. Yeah, so you might have heard like watch for any like food ingredients in any of the creams that you're using, because we don't want anything to enter their skin as opposed to entering their mouth before you've actually introduced it, because the body can perceive it as a threat because it hasn't like built up that tolerance to it.
When it comes to multiples, is it likely that if one twin has an allergy, the other is going to have that allergy, or you're treating them as completely different individuals? And does it make a difference if they're identical?
Should be treated as individuals. Definitely, we know that there is a genetic factor involved in allergies. I'll be completely honest, I don't know the answer about if they're identical. My understanding is that it can be separate. I'm going to ask an allergist that one though. But my understanding is that it is separate, because it's not just genetic, it's also like environmental factors as well. But they should be treated as individuals. I guess the thing with allergies, it's such an evolving area of research and they still don't fully know the mechanism of action. So you'll hear of people where, their parents might have multiple allergies, which definitely increase the child's risk, but then the child might have none. Or on the reverse side, parents have no allergies in the family, and then this child ends up with multiple allergies. So, it increase if two parents have allergies, or if there's eczema, there's definitely a higher risk of them developing. So if a sibling also does, there is a high risk. But in terms of like how to proceed, they still want you to still offer them, get them all in as soon as possible. The earlier the better, basically, they say, unlike with the old advice where they'd say hold off introducing if there's allergies in the family. They want you to get them in as early as possible. So no, I mean, I think you'd obviously just have this if one child had already been diagnosed with allergies, or a sibling, say even a sibling that's like, for example, your older child had already been diagnosed, you could definitely have a chat with your allergist about it, but they would still want you to just proceed with all of the allergens, even the one that your child is allergic to. Because even also with, say, the parents are allergic to eggs, it doesn't mean that the child is more at risk of egg allergy. They're just more at risk of allergies. So it's not necessarily the same allergen as well.
How would you approach that, though, if there's someone in the house is allergic to eggs? And then you've got to introduce eggs.
Like that is quite a hard one, and it definitely comes up because especially in situations where a parent is like anaphylactic, so you're really not having something in the household. Ideally, the other parent would be able to offer it. Definitely, like they would say, as hard as it is, you would be ideally trying to do it in a really like controlled environment where, the other parent is, out, or making sure that you're using separate bowls and separate things for it. The best thing you can do is get it into their diet. So you I'm sure no parent wants to pass on their allergy to their child. So really the best thing that they can do is just try and get them in. So you just sort of have to use whatever means you can to try and introduce it to them without putting yourself at risk.
Can we talk about your allergen packs? I used these at the beginning and that was so helpful instead of me having to go out and buy all the different ingredients.
So, I created the allergen introduction pack because, as you know, I do the veggie starter pack and it's got 10 different veggies, and people are like, I wish you had this for the allergens, because I always do these webinars or talks and they would like, gosh, I would wish it was easier. And particularly with things, I think the tree nut, people know like eggs, peanuts, milk even, but I think the tree nuts like sometimes get overlooked in particular, and some of those more unusual ones like Brazil nut, pine nut, etc. And maybe because there was that whole era, like our parents' era, which was like the low-fat era, so not as many nuts were eaten. But basically, I was finding people were not aware that they needed to introduce all the tree nuts, or if they knew they didn't know that they all needed to be offered individually, and that, for example, a child could have an allergy to almond but not pistachio or something like that. So I basically wanted to just make it as simple as possible to introduce all of the allergens, in saying that I don't have wheat in there. And the only reason I didn't put wheat in there was I felt bad like charging people for essentially flour. I feel like you can probably do that one yourself. But it has got, the eggs are actually about to come out just because of that allergenicity issue I mentioned because of the way it varies. So that is about to come out of the pack. And we're just going to explain really carefully how to
Mhm.
do that. But aside from that, it has got soy, it's got cow's milk, it has got sesame, it's got peanut, it's got all of your 9 tree nuts, and then we're adding fish into it. And then we sell shellfish separately, just because shellfish is one that some cultures don't eat at all. Because if there is a food, for example, that your household doesn't eat and likely will never eat, so for example, shellfish, because your culture doesn't eat shellfish, they say you shouldn't introduce it because it's hard to maintain that tolerance. So we're just leaving that one out as a separate. But basically, they all come in a powdered format. You get 30 grams of each, with the reasoning behind that being that I wanted to provide enough for you to do a quarter of a teaspoon, half a teaspoon, and 1 teaspoon. And then also to do like multiple weeks of keeping up the exposure. Even if you have twins, like the 30 grams would be enough to do your initial exposures for both of them. So you actually don't need 2 packs for it. And then provided that you had no issue, for example, with all the individual tree nuts, we do a tree nut maintenance mix to keep up that easy exposure to the tree nuts. So it's got all 9 tree nuts in it. And then you can just do a tablespoon of that once per week, as opposed to having to do each one individually, because I found tree nuts, as I said, were one of the hardest ones to maintain, whereas the likelihood is that, eggs and milk, you can do yogurt, and you'll be doing yogurt and, scrambled eggs and, toast, etc. So it's easier to keep those ones in the diet. But the tree nuts were probably the hardest. So then with the tree nut maintenance mix, you can then, mix it into porridge, add it to smoothies, bake with it, and do things with it just to keep up that exposure to the tree nuts, because we know that keeping up that exposure is just as important as that initial introduction.
It's such a convenient idea, like so helpful for parents.
It has been such a great seller, and people have just been so happy. And I've had so many allergists reach out to me and say how great it's been. I've had dietitians use it for even like pregnant women to keep up exposure. And allergists like are using it for like the tree nut mix for, like, for example, for kids that have a peanut allergy but are scared to do the tree nuts, because they're like, we don't want you to also end up developing an allergy to tree nuts because you've got the allergy to peanuts. So it's been really well received.
That's so great to hear.
Yeah.
It's amazing because it just takes another stress out of what is already stressful, particularly with multiples. Like, just takes the thinking out of it. So it sounds great.
Absolutely.
There's also so much confusion around how much babies should actually be eating in those early stages and how solids fit alongside milk feeds. Before one, I think you sort of covered this, but is food more just like for fun?
So I would say that this is like one of my pet peeves. Um, like, I just like hate this statement. Because I think it really undermines how important solids are. Like, don't get me wrong. When you're first starting out, like it's a taste, it's on the floor, it's on their face, like it's whatever. But it's just at the beginning, as I said, like we're focusing on the milk feeds, always offer that milk feed first. When you first start, I think it's more about, I used to give like recommendations around amount of food, but like every baby varies so much, and people would get really caught up and be like, like my baby doesn't eat that much, or my baby is eating so much more than that. And so I was like, you know what? I think there's too much variation. So I like to just talk about like the offerings of food per day. So I always say start with 1 offering of food per day. So if you started your baby, say, at 5 months of age, I'd offer 1 meal or offering of food per day at 5 months. At 6 months, I'd increase it to 2. And at 7 months, I'd go to 3. So really the earliest I would get to 3 meals per day would be 7 months. But they might only be a tablespoon of food, and that's absolutely fine. Obviously, as time goes on, you'll increase the amount of food, and you'll be very much guided by them. You'll get used to reading their cues. So for example, if baby is, clamping their mouth shut, turning away, trying to climb out of the high chair, pull off their bib, these are all signs to me that they've had enough, and we just go, okay, cool, like meal over, and we move on. If like they finish what you've offered, they're like looking around for more, they cry when you take their bowl away, these are all signs that they want some more. And so you increase the amount that you offer. Like, you will be guided by them. And, one day it might seem, they could keep eating. And I have people that go, do I just keep feeding them? I always say, like, provided that they're not eating so much that like they're making themselves sick, because sometimes they can eat so fast that their brain doesn't catch up with their stomach. And so then they just accidentally overfeed themselves. If that was happening, I'd just slow down how quickly I was offering it to them to give their brain time to get in tune with their stomach. Provided they're not making themselves sick from eating too quickly, you can let them keep eating, because the likelihood is they'll then go through a stage where you'll be like, are you like surviving on air? There is so much variation. Otherwise, some people will only start solids at 6 months, which is absolutely fine. So 6 months, I would do 1 meal, 7 months, 2 meals, 8 months, 3 meals. So sort of 7 to 8 months, we're getting to 3 meals per day. It's at 3 meals per day. So often around that, 8-month mark, that we start to flip it. And then I'd give my solid feed first, wait a bit, and then give my milk feed. This will obviously have the natural impact of, as they take more solids, they will naturally take less and less milk, but we don't want to cut that milk intake too quickly. So that's why I said, if you started at 4 months because you really felt your baby was ready, I wouldn't add a second meal until they were 6 months of age, just because it can start, like if some people will be like, oh, my baby's 6 months and we're already at 3 meals. And I'd be like, you know what, let's just pull it back a bit, because we don't want to impact the milk intake too early. Milk is so crucial for their development. It's such a unique makeup for this developmental stage that we don't want to cut that too quickly. But then once we do get to the point that we start to flip it over, naturally they'll take more and more solids, which will ultimately result in naturally taking less and less milk, which is absolutely fine. The only thing that I would watch is and it doesn't really matter where you start to lose milk feeds, I would just try and maintain your nighttime feed. So like if you find that, Bub is taking less at like bedtime, I would just pull dinner a bit earlier. So dinner might need to be like 4:30, so that by the time that they go to bed, they would have a full milk feed, because it's just going to help them sleep through better.
When do you like to see milk completely gone from their diet?
It really depends. If you are breastfeeding, continue breastfeeding as long as you wish. I mean, definitely from 12 months, solid should be the predominant form of food. But, there's obviously benefits to offering milk. The amazing thing about, the body is that it will preferentially take the nutrients out of it that it needs. Whereas if your baby has gone to formula, if your baby is on formula at 12 months, unless there was a medical need for them to be on it, there is no need for them to be on formula. And I would say, let's cut the formula. It's actually too high in carbohydrates. You might have heard, but formula companies are not allowed to advertise to newborn, like parents of newborns. So what they've done is they've created these toddler formulas, which are actually not nutritionally required, but it's the only way that they can advertise to you. And you'll notice all the cans look the same. They just change the number. So it's their only way of advertising to you, but there's not a nutritional need for this. So don't move on to the toddler formula. It's really not necessary. Some people will then move on to like a bottle of cow's milk, say, provided that there's no cow's milk issue, like intolerance, etc. The only thing that we need to watch for is often, like, this is kept for a comfort reason before bedtime, etc., etc. But often from 12 months, they're also having like yogurts and cheeses, and suddenly like their dairy intake can like skyrocket. So we just need to make sure that we limit the intake of dairy containing foods to 500 to 700 mils per day, because otherwise it can start to interfere with the absorption of iron, because iron and calcium compete for the same receptor. So we often see like an iron deficiency in toddlers, because they might still be having 4 bottles, plus they're having yogurt, and plus they're having cheese. If you find that they do want like a bottle just for the comfort, one tip just to overcome that is you could half the milk and then like top it up with water and just dilute it. So dilute the volume that you're offering. Or if you can, try to move to just offering a bottle of water. But sometimes they do, that I feel like the milky bottle can still be quite a comfort thing there. But yeah, from 12 months, like, the focus should be on more solid foods.
Absolutely.
I have tried that with my son, because he loves a bottle at nighttime, and then I was like, okay, we'll put some with water, and he knows straight away, and he just screams at me like he was like, no, I want the milk. Oh gosh.
Yeah. Yeah, you've got to really trick them, but that's the thing.
That's
They're
what we
often
did.
so,
We
like,
just gradually
I've
brought
seen
it
kids
down.
that are,
Yeah.
3 and 4, and and that's why often you'll start to see like a rise in behavioral issues as well. It can be such a vicious cycle. Like then suddenly they stop eating their dinner, so then they're not getting the nutrients from the dinner, so then it becomes worse, because iron deficiency actually really interferes with, can cause cognitive and behavioral disorders, etc. as well. So we're more likely to see an iron deficiency in the toddler age as opposed to the baby age, often because of that, like just still being so dependent on those milk feeds. You often will see, and then people will give them an iron supplement and it really can improve things. Like it becomes a positive cycle, like their iron intake improves, so then their behavior improves, so then their food intake improves, which improves their iron status, and like it goes around in a circle.
But how are we finding out they're low in iron? Are people just taking their toddlers to get blood tests because they're seeing certain symptoms, or?
You would be looking for signs like poor behavior,
Yeah.
becoming extra tired, like so seeming
Yeah.
like particularly lethargic, seeming quite pale, like similar to literally like signs that you would see in an adult, like, you know, tired, lethargic, pale, sleeping longer than they should be, um, irritable behavior. Like these are all signs of an iron deficiency. So I would say if you're noticing those signs, that's when they might consider doing the blood test. But otherwise, you could also just do like a low dose, you know, supplement and see if it does help, you know, boost that as well.
That's great to know. So I think a lot of parents worry they are somehow going to get it wrong and create picky eaters, especially if their baby is refusing food or not that interested early on.
Laying those foundations like from that 0 to 2 years like can really help set them up. And although, you know, the likelihood most kids will go through that like fussy age, like part of it is that, you know, sort of from 1.5 to 2, the only autonomy they have is that ability to say
Yeah.
no. Like they can't do much else for themselves. So like they're like, no, like this is the one thing that they can control is like saying no. So like part of it's
Yeah.
just like that developmental stage. Also, another part of it is like they've done studies where they've shown, you know, actually the kids that are like, you know, parents' perception of picky eating versus what actually is like technically picky eating, where it's getting to a point of being an issue. And it's often like parents' expectations, like we expect like perfect. We want it to, you know, we have an ideal of what it should look like, you know, what it should be. And so it's more our opinions of what they should be eating as opposed to the child being picky or difficult or it actually becoming an issue. So, you know, I think it's only something like, you know, 20% or something that's actually an issue. But, you know, I think it's 80% of parents perceive that their child's are picky, like fussy eaters. I think what I would be looking for, like, one, I think understand it's a stage, it's a developmental stage, and it's just like learning some autonomy. Two, like offer variety. The best thing you can do is offer variety. I always encourage people like offer a new food with a familiar food or safe food. You know, don't heap their plate with something that they might not, or a new food, like it can, you know, if they don't, or they haven't tried peas, putting a whole pile of peas can be really overwhelming. It's also just about repeated exposure. Us demonstrating ourselves, us actually, you know, trying to eat with them or eat the same foods of them to like, cause, you know, monkey see, monkey do. They want to copy what we're doing. They look up to us. So demonstrating those positive eating behaviors is really important. You know, I think also, you know, worrying about Gabby, you're saying you did like, you know, the fruit and like the savory, like you haven't like ruined them. Like there's definitely, you know, we'll all have moments. And I think unfortunately, and even I think about this, it's like, you know, it's like when I have my kids, it'll be like my second chance to get it right. But like, you know, everything's not going to be perfection. You know, life happens and, you know, they will all be fine. I think if you can, you know, the goal is to, you know, try and offer and demonstrate healthy eating behaviors and, you know, try and get it right most of the time. Most is absolutely fine. We're never going to be perfect at it. And I think, you know, if 70% or 80% of the time it's okay, you're, you know, still ahead of the rest. So I think, you know, cut yourself some slack, give yourself some grace. Life happens, things happen, things get in the way. I think if, you know, you're trying, like you're still doing better. So I think parents need to be like kind to themselves. They definitely haven't ruined them, but definitely I think, you know, you are in a really unique situation in that 2-year window where it's up to you to set, you know, offer the food, and it's our role as caregivers to offer them healthy foods. It's their they talk about like the division of responsibility, but it's our role to offer healthy foods and it's their role to decide if they're going to eat it and how much they're going to eat. So we just need to keep offering and hope that ultimately they will come around. But you've probably seen like on social, that image of 100 times and then it'll be like reject, 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 smells and then takes a bite or something. Like it can take those repeated exposures to, and I always say though, like as an adult, like there were things that I didn't eat when I was younger that I now, love, etc. Like taste evolve and develop over time. It just, but don't also be put off. Like if they don't, seem to be liking it straight up, like things take time.
Well, speaking of rejection, what do parents do if their babies are like throwing food, they're only wanting to eat like beige food, or they're just straight up like refusing food?
So just keeping up that exposure, keeping on demonstrating, and also remembering, I think sometimes I think this also comes down to, as much as I say, like encourage as many veggies as you can, the red fruits are going to still offer similar nutrient to the red vegetables. So while yes, it would be great to get them to eat the vegetables, if they are eating the fruits, that's still not terrible at all. So, keep offering. I think also just trying to offer like different shapes and different, say they're rejecting carrots, like could you try offering it in a, instead of offering sticks, could you offer rounds, or, can you try offering foods in different ways or cook them in different ways, or finely grated carrot, or, as they get a little bit older, like more into those, I guess, sort of 3, 4, where they're understanding food a bit better, can you get them involved in the cooking? Like, I think this can be really helpful, like getting them to sit up there, ask them about the food. What does it feel like? What does it look like? Or when you're at the supermarket, like, do you want to pick a vegetable? Like, I think if you get them involved and they've got a bit of autonomy, like they will be much more interested. I've read the report on the Stephanie Alexander kitchen program where they were like growing the veggies and then cooking with them. And what comes just from getting them involved were amazing. The kids would then go to the supermarket and want to buy the things that they had, grown and seen cooked with. And so suddenly they were expanding the family's repertoire of food. So getting them involved as they get a little bit older and more interactive can be really helpful as well.
I always cook with my twins and it's like, it is so nice. And my son loves cooking, but it is like, you just got to let go of like that kitchen's not going to be clean, but it's...
Gabby's got OCD.
When it comes to feeding, it's just so messy, like try not to, as hard as it is, like to wipe up after them, like messy play is good, but like for an OCD person, it can be really quite hard.
But I did make pancakes with Hunter yesterday and it went well and he loved it. So, it is good.
Progress.
Are there any signs that we should be looking for?
One of my favorite things to do is like, I forget what the colored book is. What color is it in your states that you get when you have the baby, like at the hospital? I know it's blue. The green book. So it's blue in New South Wales, but like just plotting their growth, ideally using the same weight scales. Ideally, if you can do once per month, would find that the most useful. We generally would say as long as they're tracking along the same line or moving like only up or down one line, like that's absolutely fine in terms of their growth. If they started, I'd mainly be worried if they dropped off 2 lines, like dropped down 2 lines, because that suggests that their growth is really, really plateauing. So that's probably the only time I'd get really worried and I'd be like, you know what, we're just going to check in, because obviously that suggests they're not getting enough food in, therefore they potentially not getting enough crucial nutrients that they need for their growth and development. So that would be one sign. I guess also then if they became very restrictive, like, less than, I think it's like even they say under, it could be even less than under 20 foods, but like literally will not eat, the number of foods that they'll eat becomes extremely selective. And then I think also like starting to complain of issues with textures and things that where they, or like things like not liking foods touching, can start to be signs of, more significant issues. So nothing can touch, or like, wanting to like line up their peas and things like that. So that's when we'd start to go, okay, maybe we need to look at like seeing a feeding specialist. I think I mentioned this already, but like if they were getting towards 7 months for a baby and they hadn't started solids and were fully rejecting it, like you've tried and they just like will not have even a mouthful, I'd also just check in with the pediatrician just to make sure there's not like an undiagnosed tongue tie, which can definitely interfere with their ability to progress in terms of the texture. I think also as they get a little bit older as well, like issues progressing on texture in general can be an issue with that tongue tie. Like I know of a friend whose baby was 10 months and she just could not get him beyond really smooth purees. And the issue if they don't graduate beyond smooth purees is that they're not developing the resistance and therefore their jaw muscles don't develop properly, and that can ultimately impact their speech down the track. So if there was any issues like, just really struggling with progressing textures, like, I know I hear of babies where like they're 12 months and they're still having like really smooth purees from pouches and that's all they'll eat. I would be definitely like checking in with the pediatrician and seeing if something's up that's interfering with that. But they're probably the key things that I would be looking for.
Sure. Do you see there's like increased comparison with twins? Because I guess like I've got a twin that eats everything and then Darcy just sits and she will eat nothing at dinner.
I would say, there would definitely be that increased pressure because I think people naturally do it like in a group setting anyway. So I think if it's already in your own house and you're being fully exposed to it, I would say as hard as it is, you just need to watch them as consider them as two separate individuals in the same way, you can have a baby in the womb that, is eating a lot more of the food versus the other one. And I feel like that's quite common, like where one comes out quite a bit heavier than the other one. Like it can definitely happen. Obviously, again, monitoring them both separately. And, if one of them is dropping off in terms of their growth, checking in. I think, try not to let yourself get too stressed about it, but it's completely understandable. And so I would, just making sure you are monitoring them both on the growth chart. And if something does seem, it seems like they are really dropping off in their growth, I would, definitely be checking in on that.
Need to check in on that. No, it's weird, but it's because I think it's because around timing of feeding is what I'm noticing, because she'll snack all afternoon and then it's dinner time, but like they come home from daycare and they're like starving, so she'll just snack on everything and then she doesn't want to eat her dinner, which is so hard to get the timing of.
Often in daycare they might do like a hot lunch, so like daycare become like the middle of the day meal becomes a bigger meal and should be a bigger meal versus like dinner time, because because I think they say like 70, if a child especially is in like a long daycare, they say that they should get 70 to 80% of their nutrients during care. So therefore like dinner might be smaller because they're expected to have had more during the day. So like that's actually not unusual. I mean, if you can't control what they're getting there for at daycare, then I would just on the at home days, I would say, try to give a bit more at lunch, and try and limit the snacks so that they are still hungry at dinner time. But if you can't be controlling that, then I guess, unfortunately, you just or can you move dinner a little bit earlier so that they're not having as many snacks before? I think we naturally think dinner should be a bigger meal, but like actually for them, maybe lunchtime is a bigger, more dominant meal for them. And also I think just remembering, like, I think we naturally have this expectation that like of what a snack is, but a snack could just be a mini meal. Like, it doesn't need to be like a packet of biscuits or, crackers, etc. Like I think, make that snack a meatball or, like something that is a bit more significant nutritionally and has protein and carbs and fats.
I know there'd be a lot of parents listening that, they find feeding, it's all overwhelming. It can feel a lot. I guess, what would you say to a twin parent just starting their solids journey?
One day at a time. Don't compare the two. Just like let them try and run their own race. The only thing you can maybe do wrong is like feed them honey. I wouldn't feed them honey in the first year of life. Aside from that, like it is a bit of trial and error. It's not like strict protocol, and there is actually nothing you can do wrong. Like it is a bit of it's a journey for you and them to go on, and it should be enjoyable. And just like taking it one day at a time and not letting yourself get overwhelmed. Doing what you're comfortable with and what works for you and your family. Like I think it can be hard to cut out all the noise that's online, but like, if you want it, you can decide, do you want to do baby-led weaning? Are you more comfortable doing purees? Like that's absolutely fine. Like don't get pushed into anything that you're not comfortable with, and also understand your baby will like guide you to a certain extent. Like they'll tell you if they're hungry or not hungry. Trust them, listen to them, be guided by them. And take it one day at a time. And I think it's less overwhelming than it seems from the outset.
Yeah, I love that.
Is there one thing that you wish parents knew about baby nutrition? Something maybe that you think would be obvious, but isn't.
Trying to start with savory before fruit. Like I think it does have great benefits. And I think it really makes sense to me why, when you think about the fact that, milk is naturally sweet, that they innately come out with a preference for sweet foods. I think just trying to get in some savory foods first. Yeah. If you can do that, I think you are helping them.
People would be quick to jump to like fruits just because it's easy, and you see on social media is berries, right? So it's like that would be like the first thing people kind of gravitate towards. So I think just pointing that out is going to definitely help a lot of our listeners.
Oh, well, Liv, thank you so much for joining us on All at Once. This has been such a valuable conversation, especially for parents navigating the often overwhelming world of feeding. I know so many mums, particularly those of multiples, are going to walk away feeling more confident, supported, and less alone in this stage. So thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
That's a wrap for today on All at Once.
We hope you laughed, maybe cried a little, and most importantly, felt seen while navigating the chaos of raising multiples.
We release new episodes every week. Subscribe to keep them coming.
And if you want more in between, you can find us on TikTok and Instagram, sharing behind-the-scenes moments, practical tips, and exclusive guest insights. Or watch the full episode on YouTube.
It's messy, loud, and beautiful. Life with multiples all at once.